Welcome everyone to Frequency's first ever interview. Tonight we have DJ Cosmo.
What's up?
DJ Cosmo is a national battle winner, producer, promoter, touring DJ, and art musical director for Azealia Banks. He's opened for the likes of RZA and Nas. He's performed at Glastonbury, Coachella twice. He had multiple club residencies in Montreal, founded the long-running Get Nice and the Blue Nuit night, which was in Halifax. Shout out to everybody in Halifax right now. He now lives in Toronto, where he focuses to music production and live performance. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for doing this. This is really fun. I'm going to dive right in. How did it come about that you met Azealia Banks and started working with her? Okay,
so I was in Montreal, and I was under a management company called Sofa King Raw. They mostly did DJs. I think at the time, Scratch Bastard was with them too. And they started branching out into artists. And one of them was Black Atlas, who's a pretty known R&B guy. And then they were telling me, oh, we're going to get this female rapper. I think the connection was also through Machine Drum. He's this really known producer, I think from New York and North Carolina. So yeah, they just introduced us and were like, you're going to do shows together? Okay. Because I had quite a bit of history doing backup DJing for big acts from people in Halifax. And I used to also do competitions that were MC DJ versus MC DJ. So I had just a lot of years doing the backup thing, so it fit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. So the battling in your history kind of led to the introduction.
Yeah, you can kind of cut your teeth doing the battling. Then when you're with a real artist, you can kind of bring their vision to fruition. Whatever, the way I approach the Azealia thing is whatever, she doesn't really know about what DJing is or editing is. So any ideas she would have, I would just make them happen, even if they didn't really make sense. Technically, she's mix a song that's 160 BPM with a song that's 110. Okay, I would just do it. I would make it happen, and then that's how we kind of hit it off. I would just never say no.
Would she think that way? Would she think in terms of BPM, or was she just thinking in terms of
no? She would just sound this song and this song. But the thing is, she always had good ideas. Even though technically I would think they were strange, once I did them, they were always good, always dope. So I was just it's kind of part of being a team. She has the overall vision, and then you're kind of a soldier for her. I was an Ableton soldier for this rapper, pretty much.
That's a great description, Ableton soldier.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think DJs can fall into the trap of BPMs? Do you think it helps that she doesn't think as a DJ, she thinks more musically?
Yeah, okay, so the other side of it that I had to let go of a little bit is when you DJ sometimes a lot, it's very corporate and very jobby. You're doing your job, you're getting people dancing, you're making, I don't know, bar sales. But she was approaching everything from an artist point of view, where you have an attentive audience. You can do a lot more with attentive audiences. You can do a lot weirder edits, more effects. You have more time to kind of play with space and music. So yeah, as a DJ, I had to kind of split my way of thinking into artist mode and then DJ job mode. With her, it would be artist mode because we had pretty big audiences.
Okay, so when you're an actual DJ, do you feel more constrained then, in terms of what you can do with BPM? You're just
for sure, because it can throw people off. You can do it as a surprise, ooh, I jump BPMs. If you do it 3-4 times in a row, people just think, okay, you can't mix.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but if you know your music library, you know how to jump around. The songs that will kind of take you to certain BPMs. But it can be very conservative if you follow a lot of rules with DJing, which is kind of how I started initially with vinyl. Yeah. But I know I had to throw all that out the window.
That's really interesting. How did you get your start in DJing? Like what led you to it?
So when I went to university, I was in Montreal, and that's when scratching was really popular and A-track was really popular. So we all wanted to be A-track. We wanted to be like really good at scratching and battling. And Montreal was one of the meccas for that culture at the time. So I didn't even really mix or anything. I owned one record and I would just scratch. It's a weird like bastard child of DJing, the scratch DJ world, but it's been chugging along. And that was my initial kind of like open the doors to DJing. And I was pretty good at it compared to my friends. And then I met Scratch Bastard later on in Halifax, and he showed me what like actual DJing is. Like, yeah, BPMs, playing for a crowd, the more functional side of it. Less, I guess then I was thinking in an artsy kind of way. I guess I did the full circle.
When you talk about like I'm not super familiar with like DJing and DJ culture. When you talk about scratching, is that like turntablism, kind of like Koala-ish?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Then we wanted to be Kid Koala, A-track. It's think of it, it's very like percussion. It's I don't know. Yeah, it's very intricate rhythms. You have to learn everything slow and then you do it really fast. But it's fun. I don't know. I was into it. And also what's fun is then I thought it was going to be like the future of music. Like I thought all music would turn into like, all instruments would turn into turntables. And I tend to be like a bit extreme. Like whatever I'm into, I get into it really deep. And I assume that everyone else is into it and everyone else thinks it's the future. But it was more generational, you know, if you were into DJ stuff and hip hop, maybe around like early 2000 to like 2008, we were just scratching. That was what we identified with. But then that kind of went away. It was just our thing.
Yeah, I remember that time with like DJ Shadow being really big.
Yeah.
Koala.
100%.
I was with you. I thought it was the future too.
Yeah, I thought there'd be like turntable symphonies. And
yeah, for sure.
But it just got, I think it alienated people a little bit. Some people were able to bridge it. Jazzy Jeff, he's able to put the little routines within functional DJ sets. But it's tough. It's not everyone has both those minds. So sometimes like if you got too deep into scratching, you would alienate audiences and it would just be you and three of your friends. It would be too weird.
Is that because it steps outside of what's acceptable musically? Like it stops being a song?
I think so. I think it's like heavy metal. There's these like, at first you get into Metallica, then Iron Maiden, and then all of a sudden you're into like Swedish death metal, and any kind of music can get very extreme. And I think the scratching got a little too extreme. And if you went through the phases of it, you would still get it. But if you didn't, it would just sound like noise or just offbeat. I think. Yeah. I
could see that. So did you see that as it was happening? Like what was the moment where you're like, oh man, I got to change?
Right. Well, honestly, it was when I met Scratch Bastard, because there was a time where I moved back from Montreal to Halifax, and the scratching thing was very strict, very nerdy in Montreal, and there was a lot of rules of like what records you could use, what patterns you could use. And then I look at this dude, Bastard, and he's just like cutting up Michael Jackson, Billie Jean. I was like, why is he doing this? Like, I didn't understand, but I noticed the audiences were into it. And I'm like, oh, okay, he's like bridging this like nerdy kind of techniques, but doing it in a fun way. He's using records that people know. And then it like broke the chains of turntablism for me. I'm like, oh, okay, there's ways of like sharing it, not it just being a subculture. But to me, he pioneered some of that. But he's an extension of, Jazzy Jeff, Cash Money, who they were doing like accessible turntablism stuff. But he did it in his own way, and it was inspiring to see.
Jazzy Jeff has been doing it since forever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think 89 or even earlier, they were doing all that.
Yeah, I think I know this because it was my first ever tape I bought was DJ Jazzy Jeff in the Fresh Prince. He's the DJ, I'm the rapper. And I think there's a live cut on that from like 1987 or 88.
But see how that was just like fun raps, but then he would put in a little bit of scratching. Like there was like authenticity in it, even though some people would find it a little bit goofy. I think like initially they caught a lot of flack because they got the first hip hop Grammy.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't Rakim or KRS-One but there is a genius in what they did.
I would definitely agree with that. And I mean, like they were marketed to me. Like I'm like a 7-year-old white kid in Barrie picking up a hip hop record.
Same with me. I was in Nova Scotia. We would get the culture through Much Music, but we weren't in it. You know, we weren't going to park jams or just different. But they kind of like bridged it.
Yep. And I'm like, I still go back to that record a lot, and I'm like DJ Jazz. Like, the lyrical content is a little goofy, but I feel like you're right. DJ Jazzy Jeff brings a level of seriousness to that. Yeah, that music. I think it's underappreciated. At least it was at the time, or as I was.
I think there's a parallel there with what me and Azealia did. For instance, like I think I'm 10 years older than her, so you know when we would do certain ideas or. I would kind of like bring some hip hop authenticity to like these houseier ideas that we were doing. So it was still like a DJ MC back and forth.
Would you do any like scratch breakdowns, like that kind of thing? Or is it just more like...
Oh yeah. We would do, even the Glastonbury set, she gave me a scratch part where I have like a scratch solo, which is just like my song because she raps so fast and she has such crazy breath control that there's a part in the set she needs to breathe and just drink water.
Yep.
And I would just do like these scratch sets for house people. Cause then like deep house was really big. Like Disclosure was getting big and kind of like retroing all that music.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would try to like find a way to keep people into it for like a minute while she would take a break and then just keep it going. But it adds to the show. You have to kind of give a nod to what came before us. Even though we were doing house versions of rap, there's still like a huge foundation to it.
Yeah, and I really like that about hip hop performances. The DJ like coming up, warming up the set, which is a little bit different than another performer. Like sometimes DJs will come out first and like get hype tracks going, and the MC will come out and they have like a little break.
It's just different. It's a different world. Like. Even my mind, I had, once I started learning piano a little bit, I had to just let go of some of the DJ things. But I think sometimes it goes the other way. People who are really good with notes and like traditional music, they have to let go of some of those ideas to really appreciate good DJing or good back and forth between an MC and a DJ. It's just so different. The perspective is, I always say the DJ perspective is from the outside in, and the notes and the micro perspective is like inside out. Yeah. But it's hard to move. Even me, even though I know both, it's hard for me to move from one to the other. Sometimes I'll get stuck in one way of thinking about music.
Did you start off as a DJ and then move into producing, or was it like you were into music as a kid, taking piano lessons and then DJ?
I did violin, but I didn't connect with it. I think I probably would have connected with it if I could have written music. But Suzuki method, you're doing a lot of technique all the time. So I just got bored, but it gave me a foundation. But I definitely was a DJ first. Like I don't know. I just really, same thing. Like I believed in it. It was the future. But then since then I've matured and I've gone back and like learned piano and guitar and those kind of things to balance it out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking about this with another friend, how musical, especially when you're a kid, a lot of musical teaching so technical, it crushes a lot of future musicians.
Yeah, like for sure. But there's new generations of teachers that are developing like different curriculums. Or for instance, there's new curriculums coming out that you can play violin, but then it exposes you more to like black music. Mm-hmm. There needs to be that balance in that world. So it's coming. I think the new teachers that are starting schools in Toronto are bringing that. And it works politically too with the George Floyd. Mm-hmm. All that. There was a huge kind of social media presence, but then the real live like ramifications of it and how it's going to change institutions just takes a year or two for people to set up the infrastructure.
Taking it back to DJ, so you're in Halifax.
Yep.
I guess like I want to say like Halifax always amazes me as a musical city because it always seems to punch above its weight. And we were talking before from Halifax, from Nova Scotia. I'm like, so many interesting musical genres have started in Halifax or come out of Halifax in Canada. What do you think Halifax or Nova Scotia has? Like, what's the secret sauce?
Okay, so yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and what it is there's a huge influx of kids from universities. So you have kind of all these like cool kids. There's a nice art school there too, and so there's a lot of venues. There's probably more venues per capita. I don't know what the exact statistic is, but when you're there, it feels weird, and there's gigs everywhere. So you're just doing gigs all the time, playing to people all the time. Where I think in Toronto, it's a little bit more corporate. You're doing like more conservative type of gigs. Where there, we were just doing anything. There's more room to be creative and make money there. Yeah.
Because is because the audience is like, because they're university students who are
they're young and they're open-minded. That was a big part of it. And then also you're motivated. You're always a little bit behind. I'd say we were always about 6 months behind in the bigger cities in Canada. So you're motivated to be creative and a little bit different. And just because you don't have everything, like you don't have all the trends around. So you're trying to stand out. It can be good or bad. You can be a little bit behind, but then you can also be creating new things. Yeah. You're not as stuck to the trends.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you think about, like, I'm obviously very familiar with grunge music in Seattle. Seattle kind of had that kind of like off the beaten path, had to entertain ourselves kind of vibe. And a lot of scenes that come out of specific cities, that seems to be the common narrative, right?
But another important thing in Halifax, like Halifax is a big Black community. So if you're doing hip hop and you're like a white person, you are like, you're exposed to people. You can't be whack because the people who started that culture are in your community. So they're looking at you like, don't be lame, like don't mess this up. But you can be a guest in it, but don't be shit. Where I think some other places, if you're really country, you are learning about Black music, but you're not around Black people or not around the culture, and there's not as many checks and balances. So I think that helped me. Just
how did you balance that? Like, obviously, you felt like a little bit of an outsider in the culture of this music you love. Like, was there a moment where you're like, oh man, I gotta get really deep into this and understand the roots? Or was it just because you were always around it, you just kind of instinctually knew that you had to respect the roots of the music?
I don't know. I think I didn't think about it too much. Maybe I was a bit naive about it initially.
Yep.
But again, it's more about checks and balances. When you're around people, like certain people will encourage you, okay, yeah, do this. And you kind of need mentors. I'd say I had some mentors in Halifax. But even like, I don't think I really understood racism that well until I traveled with Azealia. Unless you're really around, like, I don't know, unless you're really around Black people 24/7, I didn't really understand like how heavy racism is, even though I was contributing to hip hop culture. So I had to learn that later in life.
Was there a particular moment, or did you just like where that was like a light switch, or was it just kind of like over time you're like, oh?
I think like the main thing that I learned about racism is like there's a fatigue that comes with it, because like we would get up to travel somewhere, and let's say like we get in a car to go to the airport and someone would say something, like some weird comment or something, or just be like a little bit aggressive because we were slow. I'm like, oh wow, okay, that was like totally racist and weird. Then we get to the airport and it's like checking the luggage. Someone would like eye roll us for like just unnecessarily, like weirdly. I know, because when I travel by myself, I'm not getting that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it will be like you're midday and it's like the sixth thing, like someone stopping you randomly, or like the whole the whole crew getting past airport security and like the whole black part of the crew stuck. But it's like the fist thing, like that's what I learned is it's just like all day long. People have to deal with it. I think I had, as just a white person with privilege, and I never had to deal with that. And I think that it makes you be a bit more gentle and like just wakes you up from it. Yeah. So not everyone gets to have those experiences, but I did it. I got it through hip hop. I'm still a guest in it. But it's very sensitive stuff. It's very political stuff.
It is, and I like your term like a guest. I think that's always a good approach.
Yeah.
And it's a good approach to any scene, especially if you're not like one of the founders of the scene. Like you're a guest here. This is their scene. You're like a guest in someone's house, and treat them with respect, and treat the scene with respect.
Yeah, you're right. It does work with anything you're trying to get into. Just be humble and listen, I think. Yeah.
Yep, that's great advice. So to move out of the political
in
the water, so you're in Halifax. How did you get into battle DJing?
So initially the only DJ skill I had was scratching. So I had a DJ show once a year, and it would be a battle because it was a way to get a show. And I would work on a set all year, and then I would play for 5 minutes. That was like my thing. I did that for like 2-3 years. It was weird.
How does it like? So you literally you're not having like little battles in between. It's literally like one. I
would wait 1 year to play. Yeah, but it's a way to earn your stripes. Maybe I was a bit shy too. I was a bit shy to get regular DJ gigs, so that was a way to be like kind of nerdy, but still get experience with audiences.
Yep.
Yeah, and but it was tough. It's a bit masochistic because you could work on something for a year and then just like your needle skips, and if your needle skips during a battle, a lot of times you would lose automatically. So you just learn to have thick skin, and I don't know.
And obviously, like for those who aren't DJ, needle skip, like is that just a random thing that happens, or is it like that's something like your hand slips?
Yeah, because a lot of times you don't get to use all your own equipment, so there's a lot of X factors. But if you really love it, you just kind of like buy better needle or just try to get better. You have like a long view. That's a good example of just having a long view. Like I wanted to maybe win something in 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
But the first couple of years, they're kind of rough.
So you always had that vision of like, I want to win. And what was the competition at? Was it the that you were shooting for?
We were doing DMCs.
Okay.
And that was like a competition where you could win like your town, then you could win nationals, and then you could win the world. You kind of work your way up. Kind of like, I don't know, a martial arts competition or something.
You had your eye, you wanted to win the world.
I mean, another thing is I was always very realistic with my skill set. Like I think even within Canada, I wasn't top 10 or top 20 scratching, but it was my thing. I still improve. I still work on it to this day. Like it's just, if you love it, the skill and the studying, it's going to transfer into other parts of your life. It's going to make you good at other stuff. So it's good to stick with one thing. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like it's like anything. What, like, maybe we answered this already, but I gotta ask like, why do you like scratching so much? Like, what is it about it?
Yeah, okay. I think I really like rhythms. Like probably I would be a drummer if I had a certain education. Yeah, or like I love marching bands in parades. Like, and I think scratching is a lot like that. There's something with the resolution of like intricate rhythms. It just like appeals to my brain. But I do recognize that it's a strange art form.
Strange is arbitrary. Art forms are arbitrary. Like I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird. It's just things that you're drawn to. And yeah, also like hip hop is like older now, but in 98, 2000, it was like the underground music. That and like house and raves. Like you would have raves with like hip hop rooms and like house rooms. I don't think that's like hip hop now is kind of like metal. It's in its like hair metal phase, but at one point it was Led Zeppelin, like it was killing it, you know. So
Yeah,
I was on that wave. Yeah,
that's a really good analogy. So how long did it take you from like practicing to win a battle to like winning? I guess like I'm forgetting the name of the.
Oh right, the Red Bull one. Yeah. So that one was different. See that battle. So the scratching battle got really nerdy, but then this company, the Red Bull company, they were like, we're gonna make battling fun and we're gonna make it a party battle. So the sets will be longer and it'll be more DJing. And then at that time that's what I was doing. So it just was like catered to me.
Okay.
So that's why I won. I was just doing technical stuff, but that was accessible to people and fun to people. So I just won my town. I think then you would win your town and then you would go to Toronto, and then I went to Toronto and I won.
And that's
it.
So everybody knows the format was 15 minutes. Is that how long?
Yeah, 15 minutes. You're in front of bigger crowds. You had to play 3 styles of music. So then there was like mashups were really big and electro was really big. Like the Ableton platform kind of like blew things open for DJing. Like DJing got kind of weird around that time because everybody was making edits and their own songs, which before you had to buy it on vinyl, but then you could make an edit and then play it on Serato that night. That was really unusual. And it made this like multi-genre DJing thing like really kitschy and
Is this
big.
around like Danger Mouse time? Like
yeah,
Grey album?
like yeah. People were like, I think he did the Grey album, right, where he did like Beatles and Jay-Z, and I don't know. It was a crazy time, but also I got to say the kids that were partying around that time were insane. There's DJing a long time. There's generations of kids that are just crazy. It's just, I don't know. It's certain years where they're born. They just party harder. And that was around that time. Kids were going nuts.
For anything, or was it
they were going nuts. It was for electro and mashups. And maybe because of social media now, people are a little bit more laid back. And I think then, like, you had a Facebook account, but if you were acting crazy at a party, people were not filming you. Like, you could really let loose. So, yeah, that was the time.
Cool. So that's interesting. I think like a lot of DJs now, especially like maybe the DJs around the frequencies community, they're like techno DJs, and you think a techno set is like a short set's an hour. A little bit. So you're dealing in a format of 15 minutes, 3 genres. Yeah.
It was really, really fast mixing. I think, well, this will reflect in my frequency set. My frequency set is a little bit ADD. And it comes from that time, that kind of programming from those kind of party battles. Yeah. Okay. It's not as much build. It's a bit more of a hip hop format, even though I'm still using techno synths and those tools. It's like I'm merging the two worlds. Yeah.
Awesome. So the audience knows we're recording this prior to actually hearing the set. So only DJ Cosmo has heard the set. So I'm really looking forward to it. I definitely like that style. I appreciate both styles, like the slow build, and like I also like the quick, like also like changing things up and like adding multiple different styles as well. I think it's like both have a lot of validity. What do you think makes a good DJ in your mind? Like when you see a DJ, you're like, that's a good DJ.
Ooh. I mean, it's just connecting with the crowd. Again, this is more from the job perspective. You just know what they want. Like there was a time where I DJ'd for gangsters, like real crazy gangster, like Soprano style, but like, I don't know, the kids of I don't know, like they would bring their grandpa to the club and he would be like an old grandpa gangster partying with his like grandkids, like family gangster stuff. And I just learned what they liked, and like they didn't like scratching. They liked certain tempos. They like Afrobeat more than dance hall, and like I was just dialed in. I was killing it with them a bit, but I spent like 2 years learning what they liked. So when you get that mind meld with your audience, it's awesome. That's like a really good DJ. Then some DJs are more artistic. They do routines and they push like the art form. I also appreciate that. Again, with like attentive audience, people are really like looking at their skill. But to me, I like that mind meld, that like hardened DJ who's been working at one club forever, just has it dialed. That's the stuff that I dig.
Do you ever feel a need to like, so you have it dialed in, you know what these people like, and you're like, man, I want to push it a little bit. I want to get them into a different genre. Do you ever feel that need to do that? Or
yeah, I do that. I'll always do it 2 or 3 times a night. Like, I'll have kind of a backup track where I know it's gonna work, so I'll play the track that's pushing them, but then I know how to get out of it. I always push them. Yeah, for sure. It keeps it fun. You gotta, even if you not doing it for them to like put them up on new music, it keeps it fun for you.
Was that a big milestone for you, winning the Red Bull event?
Yeah. That was a big deal. Cause like it opens a lot of doors. That's how I got management. I got to travel all over Canada. Red Bull would fly me to every province to kind of like promote their brand. So that's when I learned to DJ and travel. I'd never done that before. I was always used to like working on my set before going to the club and then just playing. Yep. But like when you have to travel and you're kind of like tired from traveling, and there's things that I'd never thought of.
Like what's the difference? Like what was the hardest part of the learning curve?
I don't know. Like part of it is playing for audiences that don't know you. I was playing in all different clubs. Some clubs were super pop, and I was doing these weird Red Bull sets. But I was like just sticking to my guns. Like, this is what I'm doing. And looking back on it, I should have adapted a bit more. It was just like a crash course. I don't know. No one explained anything to me. They were just like, you're the Red Bull 3 style champ. You're going on the road. Probably then I needed a manager to explain things, or maybe even if some of the Red Bull management explained to me like, this is what we're expecting from you. But I don't know. I wouldn't do it any other way because that's how I learned. Doing mistakes.
Mistakes are a fast path to learning.
Yeah.
How, like, I guess if you're coming into a different city, a different club, you're sticking to your guns. I guess eventually you learn maybe not to do that or modulate that a little bit. How do you judge that? So you're a DJ, you have a style of music you like, you come into a club. How much do you think you should change your style to adapt to the audience versus how much should you kind of stay true to what you're doing?
I think you should stay true to what you're doing, but just have backups. Like I've seen DJs give up on audiences. Like sometimes in Halifax, like this famous DJ would come, and he'd be like doing his thing, and I was loving it. But then I could tell like he wasn't getting the reaction he wanted, and then he would just go to very basic DJing. Like he would kind of give up on us. Yeah. So don't make the audience feel like you're giving up on them. Like if you're doing your artsy thing, do it, but have a backup that's like still 50-50 artist, a little bit jobbing gig. Yeah. Don't do a 180 because also audiences smell blood. Like they know, oh, he's scared. Like, you know, he's doing all this like cool stuff, and then now he's playing like some old, played out old school stuff that's too basic. Yeah.
So don't get in. Is it also about not getting in your own head? Like not like.
Yeah. It's tough because certain personalities will be good at certain things. Like you might be, it's some of the nerd personalities, they'll be really good at one thing, but then I was kind of guilty of this. Like when you get in front of the audience, you can close up because you're thinking so much about all the small pieces and all the things you practiced. It's important to be able to move in and out of that. Like you might be a great DJ because you're a big nerd, but because when you're in front of these audiences, you have to kind of let go of your nerdiness and open up to people. Let the social side of you take over. Not get scared.
Is there an element to being? Is it like being in the flow and being like?
Yeah, but it's it's flowing, but it's like knowing like the pieces of you and the pieces of your personalities that made you good technically are not the ones that are going to make you good at connecting with an audience. Yeah. So you have to know, like, and some people are the opposite. They're very charismatic and they're connecting with everybody, but they have no skill because they're just relying on their charisma all the time. You got to kind of see where what your weaknesses are, where your pitfalls are, and try to find the balance and know like, oh, okay, you got to catch yourself. I'm doing this thing, I'm closing up because I rely on skill a lot. And then the other person is like, I'm sucking at DJing. I'm not mixing well because I'm like, like looking at everybody and chatting and, I'm good looking or something. You're using like this different crutch.
Yeah. I'm conscious of your cell phone battery.
Oh yeah.
And we really appreciate the time you're spending chatting with us today. This is super interesting.
For sure.
So you win your DJ battle. That connects you with Azealia Banks through management. Was it like musical love at first sight when you got together, or was it more like, we're just kind of like we're put together and over time the relationship developed?
For sure. I was coming from underground rap world, and when I saw her rap, and she could rap and sing, go back and forth, it blew me away. I think I'd never been around someone that was that talented. She was rapping better than my friends that have been rapping their whole lives, but she was, 18. It was like, I'd never been around that kind of level of talent and charisma. So I was definitely a fan. At the time, I didn't really want to be a backup DJ, so I was like fighting a little bit, but I knew she was gonna be big. So I had to kind of like, it's a bit of a give. You have to give a little bit sometimes. Sometimes you have to just become a supporting person to do other things. You can't just do whatever you want.
What was that like for you personally to go from that, like, I am an artist on my own, and then I'm like, I have to go support this other artist?
I mean, it was tough, definitely, but I was learning so much. I'm always attracted to doing new things, so I was traveling a lot. I was meeting a lot of cool people. I was learning a lot about like the LGBT world, because we were doing a lot of fashion shows, a lot of like fashion parties. I didn't know much about that world because I grew up listening to Wu-Tang, and a lot of 90s hip hop was very homophobic. So I was just kind of blown away. Just learning about all that culture, all the voguing stuff. I think like voguing is very popular now with like Drag Race and all that stuff. But then it was like still very underground, and it reminded me of like breakdancing.
In Azealia Banks' career, obviously 212 is kind of like in my mind, is the turning point. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, correct.
Yeah.
How long before 212 had you been working with her?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say, I'm not really sure. I want 6 or 7 months. She came to live in Montreal for a bit. That's when I think she recorded that. Or maybe she recorded in New York. But she was recording a lot in Montreal. Like we moved her from New York to Montreal. And then she moved back to New York. And then that's when 212 blew up. So I don't really know. I want to say like 6, 7 months.
Okay. So you're like just before things explode, you're brought on.
Yeah, kind of. 100%. Yeah, we just, the people that were doing her management, they were just getting better at PR, and they were working her, even though they were a Canadian company, and then it just blew up. They made it go.
For sure. And for those who don't know, if you don't know, 212 is a song by Azealia Banks. It's actually like, for me personally, I listened to it last night just to be like, oh yeah, like 212. And it's a weird song. Like I think for me anyway, it's a very special song, and that it doesn't seem to tire. Every time it comes on, I'm like, I kind of get energized. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
When I was playing it last night, it was the same way. So for those who aren't familiar with Azealia Banks, definitely check out 212. So 212 hits. So I guess like at this point, the way I think of it, you now have like a front seat to like fame and the music machine in a certain way. Like you have like a single that's very, very popular. You're supporting this artist, working with them for 7 months. What was that like at that time?
It was crazy. It was similar to the Red Bull thing. I just didn't know what was happening. There's no one explains anything to you. You just get emails and you got to just show up. So, yeah, it was nuts, really nuts. For instance, like I didn't understand different types of shows. Like I think something I mentioned before. We would do these like bougie shows in Italy that were like fashion ones, but then we would do these like weird festivals in the desert with like in these tents or like these weird. So it's not like I didn't know when you're an emerging artist, you do a huge range of shows. Some are cushy and some are not. So after a certain point, after a year, I would know like how to prepare for each one, which ones to bring certain gear, which ones were like you wouldn't have a sound guy or you wouldn't have techs, or like a Japan would be an example of like a cushy show. You have like 6 Japanese people around you like plugging things in for you and like taking you around. And then some of the UK shows, you just be by yourself, plugging everything in and making sure everything's ready to go. I had no concept of that. I thought you just get famous and then everyone just takes care of you, makes it go.
A lot of people listening to this, and maybe I'm included at one point in my life, like that's the dream, is to become famous and to have a hit single. Did it have an effect on you personally?
Let's say you get famous or you get hot. There's no time to make music. There's no downtime. There's no structured time. You're pretty much flying by the seat of your pants. So you better be good at what you do and you better be fast. Like have a good fast workflow. You can't take a month off and like learn a new program, or you get be really polished. Then also, fame really is just about teams. Kanye has a team. Nicki Minaj is a famous team. We had a team. You got to have a strong team. Like you're not doing everything yourself. It's like you're outsourcing. You'll have an assistant that's like sending out what you want to have done. So think of all these things ahead of time. It can be your friends. It doesn't have to be like these crazy LA people. It's just know within your circle who can do the small things that you're not going to have time to do. It can be, think about it as visuals, t-shirts, security, or you might want to like travel with a certain friend. A certain friend is like your confidant. So if you're thinking big picture, like you're really going to like make millions of dollars in music, then think of a team, how you're going to build your team. Who do you already know that would work within that?
I've heard that a lot. Like the team's really important. Do you have any advice in like selecting a team? How do you pick who to be part of your team? Yeah, big one I learned
is just like pick people that do what you tell them, like over skill. 'Cause some people are like the best at this thing, but if they're not following your vision or they're going off the rails, then it's not working. So sometimes I would say like, I'm not the best DJ in the world, right? Maybe let's say like Azealia could have a better DJ, but I do what I'm told. And I contribute to the vision. I like expand on how she thinks the music should go. So look for that. Look for those kind of characteristics in other people. One guy told me like, just make yourself useful. So like some things in the show, I remember I would record like string covers of songs we had because I wanted one of our shows to start with like a string cover of 212. Like no one asked me to do that. I just wanted that to happen. We never used it, but I just took initiative. Like I asked an engineer to record. I had somebody to compose it, and I recorded it, and I just have it on my hard drive. That's an example.
I would assume that you also understood like what Azealia was trying to accomplish in her show because you knew her, right? So you were
Yeah,
like,
but that's more of a cue that I got from, I think one of the covers, she has classical music themed cover with all these notes and stuff. So I just did it.
yeah, you want people who understand the vision and will go out and help you achieve that vision, I guess, is a simple way.
Yeah, like some people just want to go off in their own direction. It's like you have to have people that are willing to put their ego aside, but it's not for everybody. That's another thing. If you really don't want to be a supporting person, then don't do it, because I don't know. Depends what you want out of it. You gotta know. You have to keep it real with yourself. What you want out of the music business, or yeah.
What did you want out of it?
I think for me, I wanted to learn. I kind of wanted to like see behind the curtain, like at the end of Wizard of Oz. I want to see the inner workings of it, of like high level music business.
I can relate to that. Yeah, that's
Everyone's curious.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So you were DJing still are DJing with Azealia Banks and working with Azealia Banks. What led you to make the switch from like, you're generally pretty successful. Like I think a lot of people would like to be in your shoes, especially a lot of DJs or a lot of artists, to be like able to do something professionally, like able to be in music professionally. So you kind of made it in a way. What made you decide to switch to production and then live performance?
I think I always was into beats. Like, again, coming back from the turntablism thing, we liked kind of old school beats, 90s hip hop. So I always dabbled in that. Then playing backing tracks with Azealia, I would see how like the electronic stuff really works well in big venues and on big systems. So I started getting interested in the producers who made the tracks for us. And then also a lot of what I do is not just backup DJing. I would make edits. So I learned the programs. I learned Ableton. And you kind of have to be a producer now to be a backup DJ, because there's so much editing involved in making the show. Especially with Azealia, because she always would want new edits all the time. I think some artists make a show, tour a show. Our show was always changing. I would make different edits for every show sometimes. Sometimes I was just tweaking them, like add an extra bar, effects. But yeah, you kind of start to wear a hat that's like a bit musical director, even though it's still her ideas, or like a technical director. So yeah, I just started using Ableton more as a tool. It worked for the backup DJ thing.
Matt, like as a music fan, I really appreciate artists that try to change up their shows. I think everyone can point to like different artists they're fans of, and you see two shows maybe on the same tour and they're carbon copies of each other. It's always a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a while to warm up to that because it was a lot more work. And I thought it was extreme sometimes, but now I really get it. To me, it was like a really modern way to approach shows. And also it works well with social media. You always have new outfits, new little bits. People would repost the little interludes that we would do. It was cool. Remember, she's very ahead of her time. She's very plugged in. It's not just a random artist. Like, she was hitting on a lot of different levels. And I was learning. I'm learning from her as I'm doing this work,
Yeah, that's inspiring to be around an artist who's kind of like one step ahead.
Yeah.
So you're doing edits for her. I'm supporting her show, and then like, what led you to be like, I want to make my own songs?
I think you just wonder, like, could I do this? You just start exploring it, like, wow, like I DJ all these songs, I like them, like, could I make them? Am I talented in that way? Then you just start chipping away. Technology makes it a lot easier now. So I'm kind of lucky in that way. Like, the programs kind of make the beats for you now, so that helped. Other than that, in Montreal, people that I was around were just getting quite famous as producers. Like this guy Jacques Green, this guy K Trinata. They were like K would come to my hip hop shows, and then he got really big, and just to see producers around the way producers get world famous was inspiring. It makes you think like, oh, maybe I could do it. Or Yeah. So yeah, Jacques Green, people doing that's where I got into the live sets. Some of those artists, they do sets with like all synthesizers. There's also a festival called Mutech in Montreal.
I'm very familiar with Mutech.
Yeah. And so I started going to some of those shows. Just Montreal is more of a house and techno city, so it opened me up to electronic music more than like sampling soul music.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I'm really fascinated by the idea of like going for something where you're like an expert in, so like DJing. You've worked, I guess at this point, probably 15 years, like at the point where you're making the, like you are like an expert DJ at this point, a professional DJ, and then you switch to like something where you're no longer an expert. What was that process like? Was it harder than you thought? Did you pick up production really easily? Like what's the learning curve?
I like looking back on it, it's a really bad idea to do that. But I was using the blind confidence from getting good at one thing and just channeling it to this other thing. So, I wouldn't say my production chops are as good as my DJ chops, but it's risky. It's actually like a human fault. If you get good at one thing, you think that you can be good at other stuff. But there's no shortcuts. You still have to put the time in. I still try to learn piano and those kind of things to get better. And I had to learn all the programs. I bought a lot of gear at one point to try to be a good producer. That was another big mistake. Because I just swamped with all these manuals and it was very slow. But I'm catching up on it. I'm using quarantine to catch up on learning all my gear. Like even when I was doing DJing, I made every mistake you could with DJing, and I'm kind of doing a similar thing with production. But it's fun. I like it.
Yeah, and I think this is the second time this has come up with mistakes or how you learn.
Yeah.
It's important to make a lot of mistakes. It's one of the only ways you'll learn, and you'll never try. And I think you have it sounds like you have your head on straight about, at least now, about production and taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Something I've had to struggle with personally, right? Learning new instruments or learning new processes is always...
Well, this is why frequencies is really good, because it gives you a deadline. Yeah. So when you're just in your, noodling in your apartment or whatever, you're not saving things, you're just kind of messing around. But when you have that deadline and you got to hand in that video, or you got to do that frequency show, you got to unplug all your gear, plug it back in a bar, you're going to put time in. And you're going to have that kind of finishing mentality, which is why I support these things like loop sessions, frequencies. They're kind of like cultural vehicles. They get people to finish. They get people to compare themselves and just move the scene.
To all the artists out there, well, thank you. First of all, Loop Sessions is great, and we really appreciate your supporting frequencies. To all the artists out there who are maybe afraid to make that jump into a live set, how do you know when you're ready? Just kind of jump off the cliff and hope there's water underneath? Or are you now I'm feeling really confident to do a live show? Or do you just use it as...
I would say divide your time up into 3 kind of chunks. Write and have your little songs. Then string them together and do the sound sculpting, the sound editing part. Practice the show. I think that's, have deadlines for each of those pieces. For me, sometimes I catch myself writing up until the end. Those are traps. So just have clear, you're going to be using different parts of your brain, some of it's very technical. If you're in a songwriting mode, you're not going to want to be reading the manual. So, write and have know your gear, then practice it, then do it live. I think that makes sense. I think this is something I'm still working out, but know that it's very technical. When you're using the live gear, it's not everything is in the program. So try to have it split up. Yeah.
Do you feel when you agreed to first frequencies the first time you were playing live, were you like, I'm ready to do this? Or did you use it more as I'm not ready to do this, but I just got to start doing it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a roller coaster. Like the first time I ever did it in Montreal, I think during soundcheck I was still making my patches. That was the first time I ever played out with my gear. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't realize how time consuming it is to get it all ready, how much detail. Frequencies was a little bit easier, but that one, I don't know, some of your gear just reacts differently. I think that one, my bass was just an octave up the whole show. I have no idea why. You just gotta roll. But you have to do it. It's very satisfying, even if you mess it up. It forces you to finish, which is tough. Everyone's gonna struggle with that, but you just got to do it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Doing frequencies for, I guess we're in year 6 now.
Wow.
I always see the nervousness of artists before they play and the release after they play is one thing. And I think like people really have to get over that they have to get over the nervousness of them and just have to go out and do it. And find, if they can't get into frequencies or frequencies in their vibe, find nights like that where you can just go out. You got to get up. You got to get on stage.
Yeah. Also, you can have shows that are confidence boosters. I think I've done shows where I wrote a lot of new material and there's more mistakes in it. And then I've done shows where I'm just polished it. I perfected the songs or the transitions. So like this one that's coming up for me is just like just throw everything up against the wall. Like a lot of new songs. I don't really know how it's gonna flow, but you have to have those kind of crazy off the wall ones where you're just fully pushing yourself, composing. You might not even keep some of the songs, but you're just doing those like different things. Then my next one will be just a more normal polished version of this set.
Is that strategic for you? Do you think out, like, is that part of your process where you think like, okay, this one is new and then I'm going to work on my material. It's going to get a little bit tighter. And then like the next one will be like a polished set.
I think the comedians do that. When you listen to their kind of, how they build sets, they'll have their like perfectly polished set and then they just destroy it and just add all this new stuff. Just freshen it up. But when you're freshening it up, it can be painful.
Well, yeah, I think that's an interesting analogy to like, I think that way too. When you see comedians in their process, I think musicians can have a very similar process because they're dealing with a live audience. And that's always like, it's really nerve-wracking playing in front of people, but so important.
Yeah.
You think about it that way. I'm going to have sets where I'm building. I'm going to have sets where I'm refining and like, do you plan it out, or is it just like I kind of like I feel like this week I'm gonna try new stuff?
No, I think I've done frequencies twice. One stream, it was a full roller coaster. It was at the bar, and I just survived it. Then one of the streams I was comfortable with that set. I kind of did a more polished version of that set, so I kind of go back and forth. One. I knew like once I did the polish set last time, I knew that I had to just like destroy it and just add new flavor to it.
That's great. It's great you have that mentality. That was DJ Cosmo. I'd like to thank him for taking the time to sit down and chat with us in our first ever Frequencies interview. Really, really informative. Highly recommend you check out his sets. They're all archived in the Frequencies bio. Also follow him on Instagram, Bandcamp, and I believe SoundCloud. Will have the links below. Just an outstanding artist. Look forward to seeing what he does in the future.